Hello and welcome to Building Tomorrow's Insurer, the podcast where we explore the future of insurance through the lens of innovation, technology, and game-changing business models. I'm your host, Nigel Fellowes-Freeman, and today we are diving deep into the rise of embedded insurance, protection, and how it's transforming the way that insurance is distributed and experienced by the end customer. And I could not be more excited to be joined today by none other than really the driving force of embedded, I think, globally, and that's Angus McDonald. He's the co-founder and CEO of CoverGenius, and under his leadership, CoverGenius has really put themselves at the forefront of embedded protection. They've kind of been driving these seamless insurance experiences for a lot of the brands that we all know and love, brands like Amazon, eBay, Booking Holdings, and so really have been kind of working with those big brands and delivering the new experiences. And so they've started to build a business that's redefining how insurance connects with their customers. And I could not be more excited to have Gus here today. And we'll dive deep into embedded insurance. We'll dive deep into the industries that maybe you think, Gus, that are primed, that aren't maybe experiencing that today. And I would love to dive as well deep into your startup experience and your leadership.
Well, thanks, Nigel. Thank you for a really kind introduction. I really appreciate it. And it's, we were surprised when we started the business that this opportunity existed. And in some respects, we were around before embedded insurance was even a thing. So really excited to be here.
Super excited. Yeah, and look, can we start there? I think finding out the story always starts well at the beginning, and versus starting maybe at the beginning of CoverGenius, but I'd like to maybe your beginnings. And I think you learned so much about a person from where they've come from. And so can you take us back to the start? That's around, your start, your first forays into entrepreneurship and how you started building businesses and then obviously ended up at building CoverGenius.
Yeah, well, thanks, Nigel. I grew up in a small family business. My parents were farmers in Western New South Wales, and like a lot of kids from small businesses, you end up talking about business around the kitchen table. And so I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I always wanted to be interested in what was happening in global markets and what was happening around the world. And so after leaving university and heading into the workplace, just that desire, I think, to be able to have a business and look at creating something was kind of inside me. And I was fortunate enough to have a really great friend from university days who I was able to start businesses with. And so Chris and I had a number of businesses initially. One of them was an online travel business because we both like travel, and it was really there that we found this opportunity in insurance, because we had customers coming to us from all around the place looking for fit-for-purpose insurance products. So we really wanted to find a solution for them, and it didn't exist with the legacy players, so we had to build it.
Interesting, and then that kind of leads us into that the statement you made a little bit earlier, which is you were leading the way before embedded insurance was a thing. And so talk us about that, around how you convinced investors, convinced customers, convinced all your early adopters that this was something important and something you wanted to spend a bunch of time on.
Yeah, I think being able to have a clear vision for where you see it going, where you see the future going, and not just, I guess what your solution's going to solve, but the vision for what it's going to be for an end consumer or an end merchant partner or an end insurer. And so we were able to have those discussions with those three stakeholder groups. From a customer point of view, we were able to say, hey, what if the product you got when you went through a shopping cart or a booking path or a travel website, if you were going through one of those sort of places, if you got the product that was fit for purpose for you, is that obviously something you would want? And would you be willing to share, your search history and things to be able to get that? And undeniably, the answer from the customers was yes. From insurers, we were saying, hey, we can get you access to all these different customers across, those kind of platforms. Is that interesting? And then they would go, yes, because, I can't get them anywhere else. And then from distribution partners, we were saying, hey, you've already got these customers. Why don't you try and leverage those customers to information to be able to give them a better experience and to be able to protect them for what kind of outcomes that they might get exposed to in the future. And so that conversation was also a resounding yes. So being able to, I think, interview stakeholders, get them excited about what you're trying to build and see that there's an opportunity set there. That was the early days.
Super interesting. And you made obviously a big call to go like full stack MGA and kind of manage the entire process. And so was there a decision-making process there? Was that always the plan? And you wanted to completely own the customer journey from sale all the way through to claim?
Yeah, you really put me on the spot here, Nigel. No, is a short answer. So, look, I think initially we were focused on the experiences of those three groups, and for that, I think the insurers were kind of saying, "Hey, look, we can do the claims. We're pretty good at claims." But when we actually got down to the brass tacks of that, we worked out that what the end customers wanted was a lot more of a data integrated, technology integrated claims experience than what was out there with the legacy insurance providers. So at that point, we made the decision we couldn't just be a connectivity layer. We couldn't just connect an insurer with the end customer, but we had to actually, the insurer went through the distributor to the end customer. We had to actually look at the customer service or the claims experience as well. And so we added that sort of option to our model, I think, from after about 3 years. And it served us really well for a lot of lines, but still for some lines, we don't handle claims and customer service experience. There's specialists out there for some products that we're just never going to do a better job on. But we did think there was an opportunity, particularly for smaller claims and for less complex claims, to help drive automation, help drive improvement and speed of outcome for the end customers.
Yeah, makes sense. And do you think, you guys have done a really good job in kind of travel and car rental and name the lines, you've done a bunch of different work. And so do you think there's opportunities that you're now looking at that are untapped, that kind of maybe either product lines or verticals you haven't had the capacity yet to go for that are kind of in the future for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've done all sorts of lines. We've done, renters insurance products in the US. We've done income protection in Brazil as an example as well. And so, it's really, once you start looking at all these different lines or options, that you start to realize how much of the insurance ecosystem is actually able to be embedded. And I think when embedded insurance first really came out as being a trend or a future trend anyway. And that was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. I think a lot of people were saying, oh, well, it's just going to be bite-sized products. It's just going to be smaller products. And no one will ever be able to do complex programs. Now what we're seeing, I think, is increasingly more complex health and life programs are going to be driving a lot of the embedded programs. And if you think about it, life's actually always been kind of sold in an embedded fashion in some way, sense or form. We've been looking at that quite closely, and we're excited about some opportunities we're about to announce in that sector. But, people have been embedding life programs in mortgages, in kind of wealth programs. Most of this, for the Australians out there and listening to this, would have superannuation with some sort of life benefits in it. So, really bringing that experience into the 21st century and trying to not only create a really digital first distribution strategy around life, but also looking at how you can then service that in a really fast and quick and simple ways, as well, as something that I think will be a really big future trend. But also, commercial programs, there's already a lot of embedded commercial programs over the last few years. I think that will accelerate. The complexity around that has been mostly around having to aggregate lots of different data points to do the underwriting. And as you know, embedded insurance programs work best when you can do one-click underwriting, when you can have all the information you need to be able to click a button, and in one click, you're able to actually underwrite the product. So really the limitation has been, how do you aggregate all the data?
Interesting. And do you think that that's an important part when you're thinking about the channel in terms of the distribution partner and what access to information they have to, I guess when you kind of think about a Booking or an eBay or Amazon, those kind of folks that you work with, the choice of them, was it more on the volume, or was it more on them having the right customer at the right trigger point with the right time, with the right need, and with the right data? And so it's important that channel has all of those components to make it a success, or is one more important than another?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say that I think context is really important. So, and context is all those things that you're talking about. So do they have a booking path? Are they kind of right at the point of sale, right where someone is starting to realize that they're making a purchase for something, and they're probably exposed to some sort of risk? So I think that context is really important. As soon as you're after a fact, or you don't have that moment of the consumer going, oh, I've got a risk here that I'm concerned about, it becomes harder to convince the consumer about the benefit of obviously protecting themselves from that risk. So I would say we were attracted initially to programs where it was very clear that there was a purchase happening at that particular time, and we were trying to, really embed the protection solution around that purchase. I think in time, what we're seeing is there are more and more verticalized software players who have really interesting data sets. And then it becomes, okay, well, how do you do things annually? Or how do you do things where you're giving someone some sort of benefit based around the data that they've put into some software platform? We have a few new partnerships in the payment space. One example is with Klarna, where you end up with quite a lot of data about lots of different transactions, but you don't really end up with the same, purchase moment. So there are different kind of implementations to look at here. And I think, it probably comes down to, yes, scale is important, but also the context of that journey. Can you find that moment when you can embed something?
And if you were to take yourself out of embedded, obviously you and I spent a bunch of time, and think about distribution models more generally in terms of how they're going to evolve over time for carriers and for MGAs and for the whole value stack. Is there any other areas that you think are interesting when you think about distribution and what's going to really separate the folks that win in distribution over the coming years from those that get laggards and hold behind?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's saying software is eating the world, and there's that many different software platforms out there, and I think any carrier who's looking at different distributions should be looking at, how do I leverage data that's inside this huge, dynamic set of software providers? And that's kind of challenging, right? Because, the verticalized CRM for gyms or for, yoga studios today could be different, in 3 or 4 years. So you need to be thinking about platforms so that you can have distribution across all those different areas. And I think with the rise of, new channels such as AI and things, you're going to see a whole nother group of consumer touch points that we haven't even really kind of started to imagine, to be honest.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that with the team last week, and I was listening to a few pods around kind of agentic workflows and how user experiences are going to need to change in terms of how we actually build user experience layers that are better optimized for kind of agentic workflows versus like humans, and how that's going to impact things that we do in terms of Obviously today we rely on like a customer clicking a thing or a customer doing a thing, and then how do you like change what you're doing to optimize it for an agentic workflow? Have you kind of done any thinking around that yet?
Yeah, I mean, like you, thinking, but it's actually quite hard to then imagine what
Mm,
the future looks like, I find.
yeah,
And, my
yeah.
daughter sent me her chat GPT output from some questions that she's been asking it. And that's the thing, the younger generation, that's how they're going to engage with things. And
Mm,
we went through this with the rise of social media as being a very different
yeah.
way of engaging with content. And I think this is going to be the next wave. So I agree. The idea that you think that we're going to be able to create user experiences as we have in the app or the kind of more traditional web and mobile web world in the future is pretty naive, because
Mm,
when I started in the industry in the late 90s and early noughties, no one had even heard of an app. And so the whole idea of an app experience, that was a whole innovation of itself.
yeah.
10 years later, I think we're now going to see another wave. So yeah, we do need to be thinking about large language models. We do need to be thinking about how do you make your content able to be ingested by these kind of new platforms, so that you're then the right content's being surfaced, and consumers are able to engage with it and hopefully still buy your product through it. Because if they can't, then you're probably going to be disrupted.
Going in trouble. Yeah, I agree. And like when you think about that, and you think about the traditional carrier, like taking a step maybe away from AI, because I think a bunch of them are a long way from there. Do you think there's any like real misconceptions from more traditional carriers around embedded and around kind of how this kind of distribution model has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think the original misconception was that it would probably take away from brokers, it would replace brokers, and that wouldn't replace carriers, so to speak. You'd still be able to, you'd always be able to win a certain share of the business. I think what's interesting is actually that it hasn't really affected the broker business, and in some respects, I think the more complex lines are actually going to still be sold with broker support. And I mean, you see that with commercial insurance programs and things where, yes, there's data that's being embedded into the underwriting decision, and you're simplifying the underwriting by, embedding these other things into it. But often people still want the comfort from a broker that they've chosen the right things, or the right components of it are there. And I think that's a trend that, 10 years ago when we were talking about embedded insurance, I think, everyone thought that the broker would probably have less impact. But I don't think that's the case. And I think for carriers, embedded insurance offers you a whole new market that you probably haven't attacked. So I like to say that embedded insurance is all about attacking under insurance, because mostly the people in these that you're getting is access to new customers, and really then there's an opportunity to either upsell them perhaps into some other opportunity, or just for them to experience insurance for the first time when they probably wouldn't have bought it. So I do think embedded insurance is a great onboarding mechanism for new customers into the insurance space.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Angus, I want to take a little bit of step left. I'd love to dive a little bit more into the CoverGenius story, if that's okay. And well, you guys done an amazing job of scaling the business, not just in Australia, but globally through Asia and the US and South America, you just mentioned, and the UK. And so really got a real global presence. And I'm sure that didn't come with its own pains in terms of growing pains. And so can you maybe talk us through that? I know there's a bunch of, the reason I asked the question, there's a bunch of startups listening to this who are thinking about moving into different markets, and any kind of war stories or kind of pains you can share, I think would be super helpful.
Well, I can say it's really painful. So that's for
Number one, that's
sure.
the first thing. Yeah.
That's number one. Look, I mean, I've spent a lot of time flying around the place, trying to set up teams on low budgets, or, trying to get licensed in markets, trying to meet people. I think, starting from scratch in a lot of places is hard. it's hard no matter where you choose. So, but I think one of the things I learnt was if you're going to open in the US, so you can't really do that as one or two people. You need to invest. You need a bigger team than one or two, and you need to be talking about a team of 9 or 10, because it's just so big, and it's just very hard to get cut through, and it's very hard to be taken seriously, I think, in the US market unless there's some sort of scale that you're bringing. So that was something we learned. I think in other parts of the world, there's more openness to smaller kind of rollouts where the one or two people start, and you have a country manager or something like that. And we've done a lot of that across APAC and, as you said, some parts of South America and places like that. And we were able to support that from other areas. But I'm a big believer in persistence. Hold on to your strategy. If you think your strategy's right, it probably is, and it probably just needs a bit more time. And so ideally have a light enough footprint that you can test your strategy to see if it'll work in that spot, in that market. And for some markets, you might need to change it or tweak it, but give yourself time to do it. I think expecting to kind of enter a new market and get a win straight away is really difficult.
And did you find nuance in each country? I guess, like in terms of just maybe language, maybe relationship building, maybe how people interact and like to interact in deal making. Like, have you found nuance in the countries, and therefore hiring kind of locals in each country has been important? Is there any of those kind of pieces that have kind of you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think usually you're going to need to hire locals. I think that should be the default. But I think it's really important that where you've had a successful rollout, so let's take, we're in Australia for this podcast, but, if you've had a successful rollout in Australia, or perhaps it's the UK, or perhaps it's the US. So taking someone who has experienced that successful rollout and putting them in the other market with perhaps local teams, that I think is what works best.
Got it.
So where you're not just asking a new team which only has the local nuance to try and sell your solution or grow your business. I think it's really important to have those people who have come from a successful part, because they're the true believers, and they're probably going to be able to help you work out what's different or what's the nuance in a market that we probably hadn't considered from afar.
Yeah, totally. And when you're kind of thinking about team building, I believe that you're growing the office in the US. Is that right at the moment? You're kind of growing that team? Yeah, awesome. And as part of that, are you when you're thinking about team building, like we're doing a bunch of this at the moment, and we've been pretty remote since COVID. We have pretty flexible before COVID hit, and then since then we've been kind of in the office maybe a day a week. But there's kind of real kind of talk around the office right now about like how can we return. There's a bunch of demand, especially from the younger folks wanting to interact and be around kind of the kind of older folks in the team more. And so like, we're starting to consider how we do that. And obviously, are you making, is there similar calls going on your end around like, is there a return to office? If there is, how do you do it? Is it staged? Obviously, we're looking at the Facebooks and the Googles, et cetera, of the world are all kind of going down this path. And so kind of feels like a path that might be trodden more and more by more and more companies.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've, like you, by the sound of it, Nigel, we've had a very flexible kind of workplace. I would say even before COVID, there was an expectation to go into the office, but we weren't, worried about if people were or not. I just think back then everyone did. So it really wasn't that big a question.
Yeah, didn't really think about it. Yeah.
We didn't really think about it. We all just did it. Or, if we were going to work from home, we just worked from home. Or and I guess what we're looking at is, okay, well, how do we get back to something sensible like that, where if you feel like you're going to do your best work, then you come into the office. And what we're doing is just being a little more descriptive for people, giving people
Mm-hmm.
that framework to say, hey, you know what? We really want everyone in on Mondays and Tuesdays, as an example. That's really important to us. We think that if you come in on those days, helps you plan for the week. We also think that if everyone knows that they're in on Mondays and Tuesdays, it helps you organize the meetings in that office, because they're all in there on those days.
Yeah.
So we went through a phase of saying, hey, you can come in any couple of days that you want. And of course, that meant everyone came in on different days, which then of course
really
meant we didn't get any benefit at all. It was all just like that's a complete waste of time if you have teams self-organizing. So we've been quite specific, and that's a bit of a culture shift. I think there's probably a bit of a sense, I would say, that people overestimate how much collaboration they do in their own team and how little collaboration they underestimate actually how much collaboration they do outside of their own team when they're in an office. And that's because they're used to self-organizing their own team things. But actually, if you're in an office, you're probably going to be pulled into some other meeting that you wouldn't have been in there if you weren't there. And particularly if you're in product and tech, a lot of this is about solving problems that, either your merchant or your customer is trying to show you. And if you're away from where people are discovering those problems, I just think it's really hard for you to be able to discover the problems to kind of fix. And so you miss out on that opportunity. So we've been quite clear about mandating certain days, but also saying, hey, well, these 2 days, Wednesdays and Thursdays, they're flexible. So you don't have to come in if you don't want to. And we're a big believer in hybrid, and hybrid by meaning not 5 days in the office, but there needs to be some days of the week where everyone's in the office together, because that's when we're going to get the magic to happen.
And I think about that a little bit as well with the kind of more junior and mid-level folks who, by the back to kind of my kind of more junior days, like all the experience and learning I had from being at a desk, overhearing conversations, being asked to come into something that maybe I wouldn't have been, having a conversation with a senior about something I had a problem with, that kind of real deep learning, like being late in the office and one of the other guys is late in the office and you end up talking for an hour or two about something that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. Like those things just are really hard to happen when you have to book a meeting for them to happen in terms of a VC. And so I think that's also a big thing that I think about around. I think it's maybe less impactful on the senior folks, but I think much more impactful on the kind of junior and mid-level folks.
Well, certainly the onboarding and things as well. So if you've got new people into a business, just getting them up to speed, I think takes a lot longer remotely. So there are a lot of benefits like that, and I agree with the junior and mid-level folk and people. We have a team who working in complex environments. It's international. It's platforms from all over the world, platforms from all sorts of industries. So the more you can lean on different people's expertise, I think it's really important. And so, I think being able to be in an office and work together and be pulled into things and learn about problems and learn about opportunities, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. And so what's next, guys? What's coming for CoverGenius? Like what's on the map for the next few years? Can you stare into the future a bit for us and give us a glimpse of what's coming?
Well, look, we're really excited, as I said, about some of the life and the health verticals. We'll be making some announcements about that soon, and so look out for that. I think more broadly then how those products and also probably some commercial programs and things, how they can be fitted into other embedded platforms. So other software platforms, I really see a ton of that happening in the future. We've kind of started sort of 9-10 years ago, really focusing on travel programs where there was always embedded stuff before. And we're starting to see options and things in a whole lot of other software platforms out there. And I think that's probably where we're going to go. And we touched, Nigel, on some of the AI stuff. I mean, I think that's going to be really interesting. And I don't have a crystal ball around how that's going to look, because I can't even imagine how it's going to look at this point. So I think that'll be really interesting to see some of the different consumer use cases, how consumers are using it to book their holiday, how consumers are using it to buy a laptop or buy a surfboard, or how consumers are looking to, protect their small business that's selling cookies down the road. So
are you starting to use any of the tooling internally? Is there any kind of on the technology side, on the sales side, on the marketing side? Are you using kind of any of the technologies at all internally? Have you seen any really good use cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've tested some things there, and I think there's certainly some improvements. They tend to be 10 or 5 or 10 percenters, I would say. Where we're seeing more improvement is probably on the product development cycle. We're able to get more research done by using some of the AI agents to really kind of build out, okay, how do we accelerate how we do security, or how do we accelerate what our market research is like, or those kind of things. So really being able to beef up our analysis of what sort of things we should be building for our product and accelerating that cycle. I think that's probably where we've had the most impact. But I think, in time you'll see it across all sorts of different parts of the business. But yeah, we haven't really been buying someone's AI agent and sticking it, third party thing. That really hasn't been our style. We've been more about trying to organize our own systems to be able to interact in that AI world.
Yeah, it's interesting. Though I've been kind of using Gemini to do deep research a bunch, and brilliant in terms of these versus going to McKinsey and spending 500 grand or $1 million to get a piece of research. You can leave it to I've run a bunch in parallel and then kind of ask them questions of each other, and then kind of a half a day later you've got a really, really deep piece of research on a certain topic or certain area. I couldn't agree. It's a really good use case that we've been using a bunch too. I think that consulting world. But on the flip side of that, kind of I saw some data out of, I think it was EY out of the UK, that they had over a couple of $1 billion of pipeline of AI consulting, and so they're definitely kind of leaning into that, and that's, I guess, we're in that kind of era, I suppose, where everyone wants to do it but no one knows how. And so the first place that, as you and I both know, kind of first place corporates go is like, let's go and lean on the folks that we kind of feel comfortable with to tell us what to do. And so I think that pipeline might be there for a bit until these deep research models beef them out.
I'm not worried about consultants. I think they'll be like the insurance brokers. They're always going to be needed.
Fair. Everyone's always going to want them. That's right. We can maybe take we can take the small piece of research we do ourselves before. You're probably right there. You're probably right. Consultants will be all right. They've been around for a while.
Exactly.
And so I'm just pivoting a little bit more, like just wrapping up. So I could speak all day, but I'd love to maybe just talk a little bit more about the future. And was it you and the business that built such an important business in this space now? And are you seeing growth organically? Are you seeing it geographically? Are you looking at M&A? Kind of what's kind of your kind of growth profile over the next little while? Can you give an insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, so we've been growing within our existing partners. We continue to see continued expansion, even from partners who've been with us 9 years. Growing at sort of 130% levels year on year, which is really great, and it shows that the use cases for embedded insurance just keep getting richer and deeper, which is kind of what we see. And then obviously new logos, new partners. We work with 25 different airlines around the world now, which we didn't work with any airlines until a few years ago. So that's been a really big expansion area for us. And so I think we're going to continue to see, new business coming in. But what I get really excited about is a lot of the existing business and trying to find new ways to protect their customers and trying to find new opportunities, I guess, for where we can build a better end customer outcome. But also, our merchants are sometimes doing this to make money and commission. So helping them to be able to do that in a way that's hopefully a win-win for the customer and for them.
Awesome. And I'd love to wrap on one final question, and that is the insurtech is hard. Building insurance startups is hard. We've got a bunch of folks who listen to this and look at aspire to be you. And so have you got any advice for them in terms of if you're starting out day one, like what advice you would give to your 10 years ago self to say what you should do?
Oh, geez. Look, I think, working on what your strategy is and working around how you're going to go, what's your go-to-market, who do you need to sell to win, who do you need to work with to win, that they're things that you really need to test and learn. And, the first couple of years, you should expect that you're just doing a lot of that. And enjoy it. Like I look back now on those early days with great fondness, but at the time it was a real slog, and you don't know whether there's any great outcome out of the whole thing. But I would say just enjoy the moments, because if it's successful, it's going to be different. You'll never get to do that again, and if it's not successful, well, you'll go around and you'll have another crack doing something slightly different. So either way, it's always you'll never get to do that same thing again. So enjoy the moments, but be really tough on your strategy. If you feel like you've got a really great opportunity, sometimes you do just need time. And certainly, Chris and I, we were very persistent, and I think it was the persistence which has paid off for CoverGenius.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Well, look, we'll be. I'll continue to watch on the sidelines and cheering you on. So thanks again so much for your time, Angus. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation, and the best of luck with what's to come.
Thanks, Nigel. Thank you for having me. It's great, and thank you to the listeners for listening.
Appreciate it. Well, thanks everybody. I hope you really, really enjoyed this episode. If you want to watch the video version, make sure you head over to YouTube and you can see mine and Angus's faces. And as always, if you want to hear more from industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries of insurance, please do check out our other episodes on our podcast series, Building Tomorrow's Insurer. Angus, thanks again. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the sunshine in San Francisco.